Bava Batra is Daf Kuf Nun.
That's why we wanted to start at 5:15. It's a different time zone.
No, I'm a different time. I'm in Baltimore. It's actually Shabbos until later here. So I just made a mistake on the time, but I'm glad you caught it. Says the Gemara, Daf Kuf Nun Aleph, Amid Aleph, Masechet Bava Batra. So I think he got Friday till a behema. Is that right? 5 lines down? Okay. That's a natural place.
That's what he wrote down. 12 lives down. Behema. Behema Ikarin Yirtzeh on 151A.
Which one? Oh, behema.
Yeah.
Right? That's 5 lines down.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Same. Good. Just tell me if the connection's not clear.
He made the Rav Zutra, but Tuvi, I thought.
Okay, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. So that's pretty far down.
I thought he was.
We'll get there. Don't worry. Okay. Sorry. Okay, let's do it. Says the Gemara, behema ikri nichsi. Not only we talked yesterday about other things that are called nichasim, and this matters, of course, because if a person says, I'm giving everything to someone, but leaves behind something, we had a discussion in the Mishnah that that's not a true, not shchiv mira, right? It's not a true gift of a sick person. Shchiv mira is a very complicated term. I don't know what people talked about in the past, but exactly who is a shchiv mira, right? The literal meaning of shchiv mira, just to remind you, is they're laying down because you feel bad, right? So shchiv means laying down. And so, we can't commonly translate it as on deathbed, but obviously that's not literally what it means, and it's probably not what it's true at all. It doesn't mean that your person's at the end necessarily. It just means that they're sick and they physically can't function, right? And I guess especially in those times, unlike today, thankfully, the assumption was that there was a chance you wouldn't get up from that, right? There was no guarantee of cure. So that is the definition of shchiv mira. But we said if you give away all your gifts, then it's chal if you die, right, without a kinyan. But if you leave anything behind, it's not chal. So we're doing all these examples of what you can leave behind. So 5 lines from the top, we said behema ikri nichsi. Behema, your animals are counted as your nechasim. So if you say I give everything away to Shlomo except for my pet cow, then it means you didn't give everything. That's not based on the Mishnah Masechet Shkalim. Hamakdish nechasav. A person who goes to the Beit Hamikdash and says, I want to give all my money to the building the new Beit Hamikdash or to the Bedek Habayit. But Haita behem behima. Among his money was some animals that were Ru'ya Gabi Mizbeach. So it's a big machloket in Shkalim about what to do with those animals. Do you give them as carbonot? Do you sell them and use the money for carbonot? So says the Gemara, Zacharim olot. The Tanna Kamma holds that if it's a male animal, you give it as a carbon ola. If it's a nikevot, you can sell it, give the money to pay for the pledge the guy wanted to give, and you sell it with tzarchei zivchei shlamim. But the point is that you see that animals are considered part of your nechasim. So if you say, I'm giving all my nechasim, you include your animals. And continues the Gemara, ofot ikri nichsi. So do you include your birds? And again, this is pretty obvious. They might say birds fly away, so they're not as reliable. It's not because the next Mishnah in Shkalim says, Hamakdish nechasav. If you give makdish your nechasim, v'hayam dvarim haruyim gabi mizbeach, including yenot, shmanim, v'ofot, wine, oil, and birds. So you see that birds are included. And tefillin ikri nichsi. Right? Let's say a person says, I want to give everything I own to Shimon except my tefillin. I want to keep my tefillin, right? Because he thinks he's going to live another day or two. That is considered to be leaving behind some nechasim. That's not, as the Mishnah says in Erechin, hamakdish nechasav. Let's say a person says to the Beit HaMikdash, I want to give you everything I own. That means it includes his tefillin, and he's got to buy back his tefillin if he wants to use them. Ma'alin lo tefillin. You have to give it. You do an analysis to give him back money for his tefillin. Ibaylu. Ask the Gemara, what about Sefer Torah? What if a person owns a Sefer Torah, and the same thing, he's on his bed, he says, I want to give everything I own to Shimon, except my Sefer Torah. I want to keep my Sefer Torah next to me. So the question is that considered to be one of his possessions? Fine. Do you say, a lot of people take out this next lines, but we're going to read it. Do you say, Kivin to lo mizdavin? Right? A Sefer Torah is not a monetary thing. You're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah. So there's no financial value to Sefer Torah. There's sentimental value. There's practical value, but you can't sell it to us. Kivan de asur l'zvine. You're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah. It's prohibited. So therefore, lav nichsehu. It's not considered to be any of your monetary possessions. And the fact that you said I'm giving everything away except for the Sefer Torah is everything. Is that true? O Dilma, well, the reality is that you sometimes can sell a Sefer Torah. Kivan de mizdavin lomod Torah, as we learned, you can sell a Sefer Torah in order to go learn Torah, or lisa isha, or to marry and build a house. So there are exceptions to the limitation. So nichsihu, so it is your possession, and if you left it out, you didn't give everything. Teku, so we don't resolve that question. So that was where that's really the end of a sugya. It's just, we do dapim.
That's where we
so
finished
sometimes stop
yesterday.
in the middle.
That's where we finished yesterday.
Okay, well, that's a natural place, but it's not the daf. Okay, continues the Gemara though, after the Siman, Ime de Rav Zutra bar Tuvia. Now we're gonna have some stories with mothers and sisters. And as everybody knows, giving away your possessions is not easy, right? Well, maybe it's easy to give it away. It's hard to be on the receiving end, right? Because siblings fight, children fight. So the mother of Rav Zutra bar Tuvia was a widow. And let's say she had a lot of money. She was looking to get married, but she was nervous that her new husband was going to then have possession of her belongings and maybe misuse them. So before she got married, she was katvinu lenichse Rav Zutra bar Tuvia. She's the mother of Rav Zutra bar Tuvia. She doesn't have a name, but she wrote her possessions as a shtar to her son, Rav Zutra bar Tuvia, the boy lan suve leila Rav Zvid. She wanted to marry Rav Zvid. She didn't trust Rav Zvid that much. And so maybe not that she didn't trust him, but she, maybe he would need the possessions. And she wanted her son to have a Yerusha from his father, whatever it might be. And so she wrote a shtar saying, I give all my possessions, or this very valuable possession, to my son, Rav Zutra bar Tuvia, because I'm getting married. And then in Siveh, she got married. They had a big wedding. But unfortunately, Girsha, the marriage did not last. So she got divorced. So now she's back to being a single woman, right? And she goes to her son and she says, I want my field back. And he says, well, I'm sorry, it's mine. Yeah, it can be a sticky, this is how things happen, right? So they came to the rabbis. So they came in front of Rav Bibi bar Abaye and said, what should we do? The mother wants her field back. She only gave it to him because she was getting married and she got divorced, so she wants it back. He said, well, you gave me the field, so what do we do? Amar, so Rav Bibi bar Abaye said, the first wide line in the middle of the line, Mishum Ansuve. She said she wanted to give it to him because she was getting married, and she got married. Va'insuva. She got married. So it's not, and then Gershon, then she got married. Sorry, that's the end of the line. I had read the long line. So therefore, it's a full gift. She made the gift with a condition, basically. The condition was fulfilled, and no one thought about the next step. What's going to happen if the marriage ends? So that's what Rav Bibi bar Abaye said. Amalei Rafuna Breder of Yeshua, we've had this many times before, not a very nice statement. Rafuna Breder of Yeshua said to Rav Bibi bar Abaye, remember they often, when they disagreed with Abaye and Abaye's children, would criticize him by these words, Mishum da'atu mimulai, because you come from Mulai, which Rashbam a couple of weeks ago said was a place, but Rashi usually says means from Beit Eli, from the family of Eli, who had a curse that they would not live to old age, they would die when they were young. So because you come from a family of Eli that's cut off, Amritu Milu Mulaita, you say words that are cut off that don't make any sense because I disagree with you. Afilu Laman Amar Mavrechet Kani, even according to the person who holds that Mavrechet. Now, Mavrechet's a complicated case of a person who's running away, right? So a person is running away from the authorities or running away from people coming to harm him, and he wants to give away all his stuff on his way out, right? So he doesn't lose it. So there's a whole discussion in Gittin about whether people are kona. But even if you hold that people are kona in that case, that's only hani mili. The case, sorry, is that the degree gets canceled, right? So a guy says, the military is coming to get you, or the government's sending someone to arrest you. He gives away all his stuff, and then the government rescinds the arrest. So the question is, did the giving it away matter or not matter? But that's only hani mili heichadul gal yadaita. That's where he didn't say or make it very clear why he's doing it. Aval hacha gal yadaita. She was very clear, his mother, that mishum insuvehu, that the reason she was giving the thing to her son was to protect it from her marriage, right? She wanted to get married. She didn't want it to be part of her marriage, so she gave it to her son. She got married. She got divorced. But the whole point of giving it to her son was to protect it from her marriage. When she's no longer married, it no longer goes to her son. And therefore, the halacha is that it goes back to her, right? Meaning it's essentially a matana not lahachzir. It's a gift because she's getting married. Once her marriage ends, it goes back. He doesn't have to pay. The Rambam actually speaks out. He doesn't have to pay for using it during the 2 years of her marriage or whatever, right? And pay that back. But it does go back to her. And that's how you understand the gift.
What would happen
case,
if her second husband died? Would it also go back to her?
It's a really good question. Yeah, so I don't know the answer, but it sounds like from the way I just explained it that it wouldn't. But I don't know if anyone, right. Correct. So it sounds like it wouldn't, but I don't know for sure. I guess the counter argument would be that she would rather have her stuff. She just doesn't want her husband. So if he died,
Yeah.
she would want it back too, right? So I don't know the answer. It's right. It's probably is that one, right? Probably is that she is pretty clear. She wants it protected from this new husband who's a rabbi, Rav Zvid, right? And if Rav Zvid is no longer in the picture because he dies, that she would also get it back. Now the next case is Ime de Rami Bar Chama. So this is the mother of Rami Bar Chama. Now this story is told slightly differently elsewhere, and with a very different conclusion. So it's a weird situation. Some argue that the story happened twice, but that's also a little bit strange. But let's read our version. The mother of Rami Bar Chama, Be'urta, at night, and you could change the Gersi here. The Shultas changes it, but it's fine to read it this way. At night, one evening, she's dying, right? So she's sick, not dying, she's sick. She's on her bed. Her son comes to visit her in the evening. She says, okay, I'm giving everything to him, right? Be'urta katvinu katvatinu l'nichse the Rami Bar Chama. Now, we always understand this doesn't mean she literally wrote it. She said, as we're going to see later in the day, that saying if you're if you say something and you're on your bed, it's like you wrote it down. So she basically said, I want to give everything to Rami Bar Chama, my wonderful son. B'tzafra, the next morning, of course, another son shows up. And Rav Ukva Bar Chama shows up, and she says, okay, I'm going to give everything to him. Katvatinu, the Rav Ukva Bar Chama. And then she died. So the question is, which son got it, right? She was on her bed the whole time. So she was considered to be, close to death in the process the whole time. It's not like she got up, got healthy, and went back to bed, right? But she gave it to the first son, and she gave it to the second son. So Ata Rami Bar Chama, the Kamei Rav Sheshet. So Rami Bar Chama, the first son, in this order, I don't know if he was older, came to Rav Sheshet, and Rav Sheshet said, yeah, you should get it. Ukmei benichse. He said, okay, you're the one, you're the first one. Your mother gave it to you first. You should be the one who gets the nichasa. So the next brother, also Rav Ukva Bar Chama, he went to Rav Nachman. And Rav Nachman said, no, you're the one who gets it. Ukmei benichse. So everyone got the rabbi in their corner. Okay. Now, of course, the rabbis have to sort it out. So Ata Rav Sheshet, the Kamei Rav Nachman. So now Rav Sheshet, who supported brother number one, Rami Bar Chama, came to Rav Nachman and he said the following: Amar le, my time ukmei the mar the Rav. Sorry, Rav Nachman said to Rav Sheshet, my time ukmei mar the Rav Ukva Bar Chama. No, sorry, Rav Sheshet said to Rav Nachman, why did you give it to the second brother, to Rav Ukva Bar Chama? Imishum the hadraba, right? If it's because you're saying she changed her mind, but hashchiva, she died, meaning that, remember, if a person is on their bed, right, and they do something, it's chal from that moment as long as they die from that death, right? She didn't get up and didn't recover from it, and so since she didn't recover from it, what she said as a shchiv mira should be final. Amar le, so Rav Nachman said back to Rav Sheshet, it's true that Shmuel said, Kol she'ilo amad choser matnato, right? That anyone who, if they are amad, if they recover, if they recover, the deal would be off, meaning the gift of would be of a shchiv mira would be go away, shchiv mira recovered. So therefore, the person can change their mind, because even though it is effective from the time they gave the gift, right? The fact is that they could still recover and it would cancel the gift, and so they can change their mind. So that's what Rav Nachman said back to Rav Sheshet. Said Rav Sheshet to Rav Nachman, Eimar damar Shmuel la'atzmo. Shmuel was maybe referring to you can keep it for yourself, right? If you say, I want to give everything I have to Shimon, and then you change your mind, you can change your mind, but how do we know that you can redirect the gift? La'achar mi amar. Did he say that you can give it to somebody else? And said Rav Nachman, Amar le, yes. In fact, beferish Amar Shmuel bein la'atzmo bein la'acher. And you can redirect the gift, whether to yourself, you could basically say, I'm not giving it to anyone, right? I assume I'm going to live forever. Or you can give it to somebody else. And so you have complete control. The woman dying has complete control until she dies or she loses consciousness, right? And so therefore, the fact that she changed it and gave it to the second son, means that the second son is the true Yoresh in this case. And so, as they always say, right, it's the last one who visits who might get the Yerusha. Okay? So that's what happened there. Continue the Gemara. We are 8 lines from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines. 8 lines. Ima Derav Amram Chasida. This was a story with the mother of a man named Rav Amram Chasida. And Havile Mulugai Dishtara. She had a full mulugai, I forget the response, is something like a sack, like a container full of shtarot, which were basically debts, right? So she had a whole list. She was a big lender, I don't know, and she had 10 debts that people owed her thousands of dollars. She had this whole sack. And when she was shachva, when she was lying down, meaning she was in her sick bed, Amra lahave la amram bri. I want all of these, presumably there were many brothers, right? It wasn't just him, or there were other people. She said, I want all of these debts, I mean, not responsibilities, but all the schut, to collect the debts to go to my son Amram. So the brothers, after she died, came to Rav Nachman and said, we don't think it's effective. Because Amrulei, v'halo mashach. They said to Rav Nachman, our brother never made a Mashichai, never made a kinyan on this. So our mother wanted to give it to him, but he never acquired it. She then died. So why should he get it all? Amralu, no, it's a little weird, this Gemara, because clearly they weren't learning Daf Yomi. They don't know the whole halacha of Shchiv Mira, right? But says, so we're bringing it sort of backwards. But said Rav Nachman to them, Amralu, no. Divrei Shchiv Mira, the words of a person lying on their bed who gives out Yerusha, Kichtuvim uchimusurim dami. It's like you wrote them and you handed it over. You don't need to make a kinyan. You don't even need to write it down, right? The words themselves are the thing. And so the fact that she said in her deathbed or her bed, I want to give it to him, means it goes to Rav Amram Chasida. Now, Rashbam speaks out. You have to understand that she gave away everything, right? Because remember, someone who's a Shchiv Meira only gives away part of what they have is not considered to be a true gift. We're going to discuss that as we go further. But assume in this case, she gave away everything, including this sack, to Rav Amram Chasida.
So let's assume that let's assume she didn't give it to the son, right? And she dies. Then as a Yerusha, wouldn't it actually be divided among all the brothers?
Correct. But I mean, they would each get an equal portion. Yeah. No, the shtarot would certainly be given out. It would be part of the Yerusha. He got it all instead of splitting it up with them.
Yeah. Just like
Achte Rav Tuvi bar Rav Matna. Now, the sister of Rav Tuvi bar Rav Matna, Katvatinu lenichza Rav Tuvi bar Rav Matna, right? B'tzafra, sorry, in the morning. So one morning, again, she was sick. She wrote, I want all of my things to go to my brother Rav Tuvi bar Rav Matna. Lifanya, now in the evening, another brother came to visit. Ata Rav Achtavai bar Rav Matna, right? Her brother Rav Achtavai came. And Bachala, he cried to her and said, why did you give away everything? It's like, Esav and Yaakov. Why did you give away everything? Amar Lan, he said to her, now, I don't really care about the money, said the brother. I just don't want people to think of me poorly. Hashda Amri, what people say is that Mar, my first brother of Matna, Rav Tuvi, Turma Mirabanan. He's a big Talmud Chacham. That's why his sister left him all the money. Umar loved Turma Mirabanan. This one is not a Talmud Chacham. So this brother of Achtavai came and said, it's going to look terrible. People are going to read the obituary, and they're going to say, she left all her money to her brother Rav Tuvi, right? And people are going to come to think that Rav Tuvi is a great man, but I'm nothing. That's what he said to his sister. So very compelling, right? So she said, okay, I'll give it all to you. So she gave it to him. So then she died. And Atta the Kamed Rav Nachman, and they came in front of Rav Nachman, and we already know the answer from the previous Gemara. And Amar Rav Nachman said, Hachi Amar Shmuel, this is what Shmuel said, Kol she'ilo amad chozer, anytime where if she got recovered from her illness, she can change her mind, chozer matnato, you can change your mind about a gift. And so the same way, she was able to keep it for herself and change her mind, she can take it from one brother and give it to the other brother. So that's the same halacha we had earlier. Another case, gets a little more complicated. 2 lines at the bottom. Achte de Rav Dimi bar Yosef. This now is a sister of Rav Dimi bar Yosef, and she havi la piscata de pardisa. She had piscata. Rashbam says a piscata is like a line, a strip, like a small amount, a strip. He literally uses the word strip, right? Chatichat karka of a pardis, a little vineyard.
A stretch.
Okay. I'm not sure what stretch means, different than a strip, but we use the word. So she had a row of a vineyard, so a small amount, but something respectable. And of course, when she died, her brother wanted it, right? It was valuable, give her some grapes or whatever. But she got sick all the time. Whenever she got sick, she would call her brother and say, "You better come, and I'll give you over my parties." So he would come visit, and she would have a mekanyaleni leg. She would make a kinyan and say, "No, it's not really a kinyan." She would say, "I want to give this parties to my brother who's coming to visit me." Right? So she was very generous to him when she was sick, to Rav Dimi bar Rav Yosef. V'chi kaima, right? And then when she got better, Havi Hadrabe, right? So she would take it back. So he kept coming and he kept getting it. So Zimna Chada, so one time happened, Cholsha, she got sick, and Shochale, she sent, he lived out of town, whatever. She sent a message saying, "Come ta kani, come so I can give you my property." Shalach, he sent back to her, Lo be'ina, I don't want it. I'm not coming. You jerk me around every time. You're probably not sick. You just want some attention. I'm not coming. Shochale, so she sent back to him and said, no. Look, I want you to come. Kani kol hecha debayit. You can acquire it any way you want, meaning use any halachic method to get this karka out of me so that even if I don't die, let's say, you're going to get to keep it. So she really wanted him to come. So so he came. And she gave it to him as a gift, but he was smart enough to know our Mishnah and know that a matnat shchiv mira only works if you give away everything. So he said to his sister, "Look, give me the field, but leave behind the corner for yourself," right? Shaira, leave a little bit behind. Now, we're going to see this more in a second, but when you leave a little bit behind, it's no longer a matnat shchiv mira, it's just a matana, right? And in order to make a matana, you have to make a kinyan, right? So also, kanumina, he made a kinyan from her. So he said to his sister in her hospital bed, right? Here, sign here and make a kinyan. Maybe they did a kinyan sitter or they did a shtar, and you'll give me over the pardes and you keep some of it for yourself. So he thought that even if she lives, he'll be able to keep it. Kikaima, now when she lived, she got up from the bed. Hadrabe, she said, "I changed my mind. I want the whole field back." Okay, so she wrote him a letter, certified letter, said, "I want my whole field back." Atoy the commander of Nachman. So he didn't want to give it back. So she went to Rav Nachman. And she said to Rav Nachman, "My brother stole my field. He manipulated me, he took my field." Shalach le, so Rav Nachman sent a message to, I'm forgetting the name, sorry, to Rav Dimi bar Yosef, and he said, come to court to hear, you got to decide the case. You have your sister's vineyard. She claims it back. You claim you have it. You have to come to court. Lo ata. Rav Dimi bar Yosef didn't come to court. He said, "I'm not coming. This is ridiculous." Amar, he said to the messenger, right? My iti, what do you need me for? What claim does she have? Hashaira v'kanamina. She left behind some of it. She didn't give me the whole field, so it's not a matnat shchiv mira, and I made a kinyan. So this is like a kangaroo court. I'm not coming to court. You guys, I did it perfectly. I followed all the rules. I don't have to come defend myself. Shalach le, so Rav Nachman sent back to him and said, "Look, ilo atit, if you don't show up to court, I'm going to wound you with a silu. Silu is like a needle or like a prick, a thorn that won't draw blood. Meaning, I'm going to beat you up without beating you up by putting you in chera, right? I'm going to excommunicate you for not showing up to court. Then I'm going to punish you without hurting you, without drawing blood." So he came to court. So Amar Lahu, so now in court, Rav Nachman said, "L'sahadi," to the witnesses, "Heichi hav ma'isa." What exactly happened in this hospital room? Amrulay, and they said to him, to Rav Nachman, "Amra hachi." This is what this woman said. Vai dekamita hach itita. Whoa, that this woman is dying. So she was clearly thinking she was dying. And Amar Lahu, so Rav Nachman said to them, "Imkain havi mitzaveh machmat mita." Then it's considered to be a new category, which we haven't really had till now. We've discussed it briefly, which is not the same, which is a category of mitzaveh machmat mita. We're not where a person is sick. And this is why you have to make a big distinction, right? Anyone being sick has a thought, maybe I'll die, maybe I won't die. But there's a new category of really, really terminal. A person thinks they're in the process of dying. And they make a tzava means they make an instruction because they think they're dying. That practicality it's like a condition. I'm giving this to you because I'm dying. And if I'm not dying, everything goes back. Even if you're a Kenyan, even if you're Mishayer, no matter what you do, mitzaveh machmat mita choser. So it's a whole new category, which is related, of course, but it's a new category where it's not just a person who is sick and on their bed, it's a person who actually thinks they're dying. And so it's more than a shchiv mirah. In that case, it's almost contingent on dying. And if you don't die, it doesn't matter if you made a kinyan, because it's like you made a kinyan with a condition, and therefore the kinyan is batra. So the son lost, the brother lost in this case. Now, Itmar, we're going to now exactly elaborate on these details. Says the Gemara, the statement was, if you have a matnat shchiv mirah b'miktzat, right? A person is in their bed, they're giving out their things. They give out, let's say, they're giving out some of their possessions to friends. Let's say, I want to give my oldest son everything, or half, not mix up means part of it. I want to give half of my possessions, right? So we said a little bit earlier that that's not, the Mishnah made it sound like that's not a matnat shchiv mirah. Says the Gemara, Amru Rabbanan, the Rabbanan said, some quote this, sorry, they add the words. Anyways, I'll just read it this way. Amru Rabbanan Kamei Rabbanan said in front of Rava, Mishmei de Marzutra Breder of Nachman, who they said in the name of Marzutra, the son of Rav Nachman, who said it in the name of Rav Nachman. Damar Mishmei de Rav Nachman. What's the halacha? Harei hi kematnat bari. This is like a gift of a healthy person, right? The person, although they're on their bed, they're only giving part of what they own, which means that they, in some ways, assume they're not going to die. But they're, when people are sick, they think about their life and they're reflecting and they're deciding, I have too many possessions. I want to give things away. I want to be more generous. So it's like a regular matnat bari in some ways. And also, harei kematnat shchimira. But in some ways, it's like a matana of shchimira. And what does that mean? Harei kematnat bari, because Shem Amad, if the person gets healthy, Eino Choser. It doesn't go back to the original owner, because only a matnat shchiv mirah, it's conditional on you dying. If you don't die, it goes back to you. Here, you're basically a regular person giving away a gift. You're sick, but you're a regular person. And so even if you get better, you can't undo it. However, it's also matnat shchiv mirah, harei matnat shchiv mirah, the lo boy kinyan. It also has the details that since you're sick, this is one explanation. Since you're sick, and therefore we're worried that if we make you have a kinyan, we're going to upset you and you're going to get sicker. Remember the whole question of Taradaite, that you don't need a kinyan. So therefore, you basically have you could say best or worst of both worlds, where it basically doesn't undo itself, and you don't need to make a kinyan. That's what they said in the name of Rav Nachman. Amar lahu Rabba, I think they changed it to Rabba, right? Rabba, no. Well, okay, I'm going to read it this way. Amar lahu Rava. Where's my bet? Okay, I'm sorry, my Gemara is not my usual. Okay, Amar lahu Rava. So Rava said to this group of people who quoted this in front of Rav Nachman, Lav amina lachu. Don't I tell you guys all the time? Lo titlu buki sriki b'Rav Nachman. Don't say ridiculous things in the name of Rav Nachman. Buki sriki means empty bottles, right? Don't attribute mindless thoughts to Rav Nachman. That's ridiculous what you just said. Because how in the world could something be considered to be both a matnat shchiv mirah, where you don't need to make a kinyan, and a matnat bari, where even if you live, it's gone away? How in the world can you give something over without a kinyan, right? Hachi Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, Harehi kematnat bari, for everything, uboi kinyan, right? If a person's on their bed and they say, I want to give half of my possessions to my son, there's no special rules of matnat shchiv mirah. It's a regular matana. If you give a kinyan, it's a kinyan. If you don't give a kinyan, it's not a kinyan. That's the whole story. So that's what Rav Nachman was quoted as saying by Rafa. You guys can hear me? I got a little background noise here. Okay.
We lost some of that. There was
Rav
some static. We lost those
Okay.
last two sentences.
So I'll repeat it. Thank you. So we're basically Rava said in the name that Rav Nachman never would have said something like that. That if you are a matnat shchiv mirah, partial, you can't say it's both a matana of a bari, of a healthy person, and a matana of a shchiv mirah. It's one or the other. And the halacha is that it's not a matnat shchiv mirah because you didn't give away everything. It's like a matnat bari. It's like any person who goes to their neighbor and says, I want to give you a gift. And the only way to consummate that gift is by making a kinyan. So if you make a kinyan, it goes to that child. If you don't make a kinyan, it doesn't. It's like anything else. So that's what Rav Nachman says, according to Rava. Eitve Rava the Rav Nachman.
You don't make a kinyan. Right, they don't make a kinyan mishchiv mirah, matnat shchiv mirah in general.
Correct. Right, so that's what he's saying. This is not a matnat shchimira, and the only way it'll work is if you treat it the way you treat matnat bari. So that's what Rav Nachman is quoted as saying by Rav. Now, ask Rav to Rav Nachman, what about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah that we started this whole sugya with 5 days ago or so said that if you're, I'm quoting the Mishnah now in the Gemara, shir karka kol shehu, that a shchimira who leaves behind karka, right? So then because he left behind karka, it's not shchimira. And if he matanato kayemet, right? So the matana remains, right? This was a case where a person was a shchimira, he gave over his possessions, but he left behind some karka, and then he got healthy and he didn't die. The Mishnah said the matana remains. Now the assumption is my lav de lo kanamine. We assume he didn't make a kinyan because the Mishnah didn't mention it. It says, well, no, of course he did kanamine. If that's the case of the Mishnah, he gave over a gift of part of his estate with the kinyan, and then he recovered. It's like any other gift. Okay, but if the case in our Mishnah is where you made a kinyan, yachi ema seifa. The seifa said, remember, he's a shchiv mira, lo shier karka kolshu. You don't leave behind any property, and then you crack the life, meaning you get healthy again. Says the Mishnah, ein matanato kayemet. Your matana has no effect because since you gave it as a shchiv mira and you didn't die, everything goes back. But if the case in the Mishnah is where you made a kinyan, what you're implying then is even if you made a kinyan when you were on your bed and you gave away everything, the fact that you got healthy means that it goes back. Ask the Gemara, if you made a kinyan, why isn't that kinyan enough? So Nachman said back to Rava, Amar Le, because that's the halacha. Hachi Amar Shmuel, we've quoted this many times before. Shchiv mira shekatav kol nechasav lacherim. A person who's a shchiv mira is lying on his bed and he writes all of his possessions, everything goes to somebody else. Even though you made a kinyan, Ahmad, if he gets healthy and stands up again, choser, the whole thing goes back to the original owner. Even if you made a kinyan and a star and anything, because biyadua, because we understand from this situation, shelo haya mitzaveh ela machmad mita, that he was only giving this instruction because he thought he was going to die, and the proof is that he gave away everything. A person who thinks they're going to live doesn't give away everything. So the fact that you gave away everything, even though you made a kinyan, it's like the case we had earlier, it's as if you made a condition in the gift, even though you didn't say it. And therefore, once you get healthy, you go back completely. So that is, we're going to keep getting a little bit closer, but that's how we paskin actually. What about the following case? Ma'aseh, there was a story, Iman shel b'nei Rochel, the mother of the sons of Rochel. There was a man named Rochel. Shmuel says it was a name. Rochel means a peddler, a tradesman. So maybe that's why, he was named like whatever. People take the names of their trade. His wife, the mother of the sons, was dying, right? And she said, Shaita chole, she was sick. And she said, Tinatein kivinati leviti. I have a kivinati, which is some kind of thing that you put on your heart. I don't know how they translate it there. I heard brooch before. But yeah, so she had, the response is something you put on your heart, I guess you wear is a beautiful thing. She said, I got this great thing. It's in my Yerusha. I want to give it to my daughter. Remember, the daughter normally gets nothing in the Yerusha, right? So I want to give this to my daughter. And v'hu b'shnei masar mana. And it's worth 12 mana. It was a very valuable thing. Umeita, and then she died. V'kimu divara. And they fulfilled her words, right? Now, why did they fulfill her words? This essentially is a shchiv mira who gave away part of what she had. The assumption is that this was not, her brooch was not the only thing she had. She wanted everything to go to her sons except for this piece of jewelry. So why isn't that a shchiv mira that gives a part of what they have? And now we also assume she didn't make a kinyan because it says she spoke about it, right? She said it. Divarel kaimim. So she was just her words. It wasn't a kinyan. That's what Rashbam says. So why in the world did this go to the daughter? According to you, Rav Nachman, that a shchiv mira b'miksad is like a matnat chinam and it only works if you make a kinyan. Answers the Gemara, you're right, but there she was dying. Hatam de mitzaveh machmat mita. That is the other category where when it's very clear that someone is at the end and they're doing this because they're dying, then it works even if it's only partial. Okay, we'll discuss, we'll summarize it in a minute. But let's continue. Eitvei Ravina Rava. Asked Ravina to Rava from one final case, which is a Mishnah, a Gemara in Gittin, a Brayta. Ha'omer tenu get zet li'ishti. Man is dying or he's going out to be executed, and he says, give this get to my wife. Gives it to a shliach, right? Or shtar shechur zel avdi. Give this shtar get shechur to my evet. Umate, and he dies before they hand it over. So says the Mishnah, of course, lo yitnu lachar mita. You can't give it after he died, right? It has to happen during his life. She's an almana, but she's not a divorce, right? And if there's a brother, after yibam, etc. But if you say, continues the Mishnah, to nu mana leploni umate, give $100 to Ploni, and then you die, yitnu lachar mita. Then you give it after he dies, even though you didn't give it during his life. Now, we assume that's because he's a shchiv mira, right? He's a person on his deathbed who says, give away money. Now, we assume that mana is not all of his money. He doesn't say give everything. He says give $100. So this seems to be a matnat shchiv mira b'mixat. And the Mishnah, says that you give it even after death because it's a matnat shchiv mira. Now, that only is a question if you didn't make a kinyan. Says how do you know? Why are you making an assumption that there was no kinyan? Because the first case was a get. You had to get. Then a get, of course, there's no concept of kinyan by a get. A get is just handed over. You don't acquire a get. So my get lav bar kinyan af hayanami lav lo kanamine. So we assume that this is also a case where you were not kanamine, and you said I give 100 a mana to this guy, and we fulfill your words. Why isn't that not a matnat shchiv mira b'miktzat? Answers the Gemara, hatam nami b'mitzaveh machmat mita. So too, this is a case where you gave a command machmat mita. So because the person was dying, it actually is effective even if it's only partial. Now, let's do parentheses for 1 minute here because Rafuna disagrees, though he's wrong. Rafuna Breder of Yeshua says, I disagree with everything we just said. And mitzaveh machmat mita ba'alma by kinyan. I hold that even if you're mitzaveh machmat mita, so even if you give a command while you're dying or because you know you're dying, it's the same as a shchiv mira. And if it's partial, you got to do a kinyan, right? V'chitanya hani matnita. Now you have to then understand these two last mishnayot where we said it's given away even without a kinyan. Is b'mchalei kol nechasav. It's where you're giving away all of your possessions. So although it doesn't sound that way, right? You have to understand the cases where the mother is giving away all of her jewelry and all of her possessions, and she says this brooch goes to this person and this thing goes to that. We just quoted one small segment of it, because if you give away everything, then you're a regular shchiv mira. Right? If you don't give away everything, then a shchiv mira b'miktzat needs a kinyan. The first opinion that we had earlier of Rav Nachman was that if you're mechalek machmat mita, you're giving out things because you're dying, you don't need a kinyan, even if it's only a small thing. This opinion disagrees, and would have to understand that was where you're giving away everything. Dahi matnat shchiv mira shavu, because therefore it's a matnat shchiv mira. But vehilchata, now 4 lines from the bottom. Let's give you the bottom line. Beautiful ending to the daf. A matnat shchiv mira b'miktzat, if a person is sick and they give away things only part of their possessions, boi kinyan. You need to make a kinyan because it's not a matnat shchiv mira, it's a matnat bari. Afa gav demeit, even if ultimately they die, right? Even if they don't get better. But the fact that they only gave away part of their possessions means that they were not assuming they were going to die. And therefore it's a regular matana. If you make a kinyan, it goes. If you don't make a kinyan, it doesn't go. But mitzaveh machmat mita, a person who gives a tzivoy because they think they're dying, meaning they're in the process of dying, lo boy kinyan. You don't need a kinyan, and hudmate, right? That's of course only true if they die. But amad, if they end up living, even though they thought they were going to die, choser, then it goes back. The afagav dekonomine, even if you made a kinyan, right? So the kinyan doesn't have any effect. So if you're functioning as a dying person, then you can give even part of your estate, and it's koneh. You don't have to make a kinyan, and if you live, it goes back. Now, tomorrow we're gonna stop there. It's the last word on the daf. Tomorrow morning, unfortunately for Miriam, 7:45 a.m. We are, God willing, as long as I make it back safely tonight, we're going to start from the top word on Kuf Nun Bet and discuss what happens if you do both. What if a person's a shchiv mira and they also make a kinyan? Does that kinyan somehow abrogate the halachot of shchiv mira and say, well, why'd you make a kinyan? Maybe you didn't mean to give it away like a shchiv mira does. And therefore, maybe well, we'll see. If you live, it's not given to the other person. It is given to the other person. So we're going to discuss that tomorrow.
But even if they didn't make a kinyan here, right? In this case, with like the story of this woman, she gave the brooch. She did
even
not
if she didn't
make a kinyan.
She did not make a kinyan. So
right. So it goes back to her, right?
If she doesn't die, it goes back to her, correct.
Right. So that's a case where she did not make a kinyan.
Well, even if she made a kinyan, it would go back to her.
Okay, but I thought didn't we want to say that normally if she made a kinyan, then it would go back to her, right? Because it's a mitzaveh machmat mita, right? And then
No.
here, but here we say even if she did not make a kinyan, that he's bringing this as an example, a case where she did not make a kinyan, and it goes back to her.
It doesn't go back to her. She died. It goes to the daughter who she gave
But
it
if she
to.
were to go back, if she did not die, wouldn't it go
If
back
she
to her
did
even
not-
without a kinyan?
Correct. If she did not die, it would go back to her, even without a kinyan. Even with a kinyan, it would go back to her. Kinyan makes it less likely to go back to her, right? But we're saying even if she made a kinyan, it would go back to her because she only gave it in the context of a dying woman and she didn't die, so it goes back to her even with the kinyan. It's like a condition, basically.
But wasn't the case brought because it was looking for it here, that this was that she wanted to give it to the daughter. She gave it to the daughter, but she said
Right.
that but we say that if so and she died in that case. So then, okay, so then it what happened? Kimu divareha, right? That so therefore, what happened? It went to the daughter, right? Did go to the daughter. The brooch went to the daughter.
Correct. It went to the daughter. The brothers wanted it, but instead their sister got it. And that's because it's a matnat shchimira, even though it's been mixat, but because she was dying, it's mitzaveh machmat mita. And so when this person's mitzaveh machmat mita, even partial is given away. You don't have to give everything away. So that's why I started off. There's basically three categories, right? There's healthy people, there's those who are sick, and those who are dying.
But in this case, there was no kinyan.
Correct. There was no kinyan. She was
But
mitzaveh
normally we
machmat.
would say that it does require a kinyan, right? The
No,
mixat.
only if she was not dying. Correct. If a person's giving a gift to another person, they usually need to make a kinyan. The only reason you don't need to make a kinyan here is because she's mitzaveh machmat mita, because she's dying.
So not required. The kinyan was not required. That was an
Correct.
example. That was the question that Reb Masharsha brought, right? That why should it go to her even in the absence of a kinyan? Because in a partial case, you normally we would require a kinyan, but here there was no kinyan.
Correct. So the answer was that this was mitzaveh machmat mita.
Right. So, but normally we would think that a kinyan would be required because it was a partial case. But in this case, even without a kinyan, it still went to her.
Exactly. Okay. Look forward to learn tomorrow morning, everyone, except for Miriam. No, we'll learn when we learn again. Shavua tov.